All right, we'll kick this thing off. Thanks for showing up this week, everybody. I got a lot of exciting things to talk about, and I'll just dive into the first one that to me is pretty monumental. I think you guys will find it equally so. So this past week, well, actually about a week ago, we kind of quietly opened up the gate internally in our console.exapro.net. That is, of course, our headquarters and dashboard for everything relating to the licenses and if you get started with the relayers and the billing and all that. So we kind of quietly opened up a gate inside that allowed credit card payments to go through and payment for XNet services to be used. We didn't really announce it all that loudly. That was somewhat intentional. But over the past week, we have seen some of that start to go through and some of that start to happen. So we're pretty excited to announce that, yeah, this past week, XNet services really has become truly live. We mean it this time. And already some of that use is trickling into the network, and the network today is live. It's full 1.0 release, everything, and that's pretty historic time for the project. I think you would all agree that that's something to be pretty excited about. So what's probably made it maybe a little less exciting is that we thought we would get to this point probably a bit earlier than we really did. There have been a couple of times that we came close, but then something came up, and we decided it was for the best to kind of delay opening that gate. But that time has come and it's passed, and our network is fully live today. So give a pat on the back to everybody. If you see a storage provider, give them a high five. So yeah, I'm not sure if my co-host Ken is with us yet. If he's not, I can just dive into. I'm not sure if my co-host Ken is with us yet. If he's not, I can just dive into the next topic. Yeah, this next one's a little bit more housekeeping, but I'll still it's still worth bringing up and mentioning. So, for the longest time, we've had a wealth of resources and information on our docs. Hopefully, all of you have been to our docs. They're pretty helpful, and we try to keep them up to date as best we can. That's where you would probably have wound up if you went to go start a storage provider, or if you forgot what some of the settings were for some things, or anything like that. We do try to keep a wealth of information on the resources. So those have traditionally been at docs.scpri.me. That's been our kind of docs page for landing, for all sorts of different things. But we have started to split out and branch out a little bit. So we now have docs.examiner.net, and that'll be a very much storage provider oriented docs place. So if you get the Examiner hardware, like the 16 or 64 terabyte unit, all the setup guides will now be pointing to there. I think there will be kind of a crossover type thing. So those pages on the docs aren't necessarily disappearing right away. Ideally, we can redirect, but primarily moving forward, we will be pointing to docs.examiner.net. And that's kind of in line with examiner.net being our primary storage provider resource. So yeah, so all the hardware Xminer guides will be there for getting started with that physical setup. And also, as some of you, or a lot of you actually, especially after last week's call with SPF and all that, a lot of you have been setting up the full software licenses. So those guides are all hosted as well in that same place at docs.examiner. So yeah, lots of pages already up today, lots of guides, and there's just going to continue to be more as we build out future models of Examiner. As our Examiner, the software and the UI becomes more complex and more able, there's just going to be more pages and more information for you to bathe in. So this is, yeah, something that seems kind of minor today of branching that out, but I think it ultimately makes the most sense to have our different docs resources oriented to different things. So docs.scpri.me isn't going anywhere. That will continue to be around, but that'll be more kind of network oriented type stuff. And kind of information related to the kind of decentralized network behind everything. But yeah, for specifically storage provider setup and licenses and hardware, all those kinds of guides, that would be moved over to the Examiner. And of course, there is also my favorite, docs.exapro.net, and that's where all the relayer stuff is living. So there's lots of information out there, but because it's catered to different people looking for different things, we're just moving ahead and splitting all that apart. So we learned lots about SPFs last week. We learned about well, the fact that you can get them at all, but especially if you, of course, get that full license, you will be automatically entered. As long as you're a good boy and you keep that 95% uptime, then you should get 1,000 SPF sometime next year. Once again, that isn't done through us, but that's done through kind of stakeholders and people who have similar interests in seeing the network be at its best. So that's pretty awesome of them. But we've gotten a lot of questions, and rightfully so, about how do you actually receive an SPF, or what does it look like in your wallet, and how do you claim the proceeds that they earn. So to answer all of those, essentially the web wallet that we put out earlier this year, so that's the kind of new and improved wallet. I think it looks pretty slick and it's easy to use. So that's kind of replacing the old UI wallet that will still kind of continue to exist in the background, but we're not really putting any more effort into that one. It just kind of turned into a code base that was not very straightforward or nice to maintain anymore. So the web wallet is where all the stuff's happening these days. So in the web wallet, in a near release, or in a release that you can expect in the near future, you have the ability to not only see your SPFs that you own, but there will be a pretty straightforward and easy button in order to claim the yield that those SPFs have earned as well. So if you're somebody that either got SPFs from Ian recently, or if you're anticipating them in the future, you can do everything that you'll need to do directly through the web wallet. And also, if you're an XMiner owner, we are anticipating in the future as well to have that SPF support built directly into the UI. So yeah, that is something that isn't quite there today. Obviously, the XMiner addresses, they are able to receive SPF. Anything that can receive SCP can also receive SPF, but that's just not reflected in the XMiner balance today. But that will be a thing moving forward, and especially as more of you start to get them. So that's cool. So look forward to that. Well, I'm looking forward to that future web wallet release. Some of you that have SPF, I'm sure you will be too. And hopefully those of you who don't have them yet will get them in the near future, because they're pretty awesome to have. I think hopefully you learned kind of how they worked last week, but in case you didn't learn how they work, you can expect from us over the next couple of weeks a full dedicated SPF article on not only kind of what they are and how they actually work on kind of a blockchain level, but kind of understand their role and like why they came into existence, why they continue to exist, why some people prize them higher than their children. Yeah, there's a lot of kind of interesting history, and it's a pretty unique type of token. There aren't a lot of kind of dual token blockchains out there, but ours is one of them. And we're proud of that fact. And I think SPFs will have a pretty cool role in the future. So looking forward to putting that out for all you guys to read, and looking forward to you guys having an opportunity to have those SPF.
I just want to touch really quickly on that first point. So yes, the network is live and it's working correctly, and it is actually accepting stuff. We do hope to see quite a bit of use from you folks, because as we announced last week, there is 50 free gigabytes in perpetuity. And in other words, every month you get 50 free gigabytes. So if you want to use our cloud for storing stuff now, you kind of can. You do have to agree to the terms of service when you download the relayer and so forth. So it's not really a situation where you can upload everything and anything. And we are primarily looking for business customers, but there's no reason why individuals can't use it. And as I said, there's 50 free gigabytes. What we're really interested in right now is seeing for people who get past the 50, how well the billing is working and if there's any wrinkles that show up along the way and so forth. So far, we have a few people that have gone past that threshold. And the way it works is your console updates and tells you how much you've used to minute or date or hour or whatever it is we're clocking. I think it's to minute or something along those lines. And then that way, ultimately, when you decide ultimately to cancel your account, you can only pay for what you've used instead of having to do anything else. So pretty cool situation, and it is active for you to use. Do you want to get into a number of other things now? start with DxPool. So DxPool is a China pool that I reached out to some time back because they seem to be tightly affiliated with the folks at Gold Shell Miners, and it seems like those guys are kind of tied together. So it made a lot of sense to try and reach out to DxPool about providing a pool for us. We're singular right now on Saya mining, with RP Crypto having just set up this new pool using the open source wallet. I've counseled him that that's probably going to turn into something he's not really interested in, but we'll see. A couple of the people that originally set up the open source stayed with us for a lot of years before they gave up, but it's just the software needs a lot of help. With DxPool, what the goal is, there is a lot of this hidden hash rate over in China, according to older fish. There is a bunch of it just sitting in warehouses, not doing anything. I'm sort of hopeful that if we can get a China pool set up, that potentially we could pull those people down. People that don't know the history, there's some really weird sort of assumptions that, are out there. We had a WeChat group for a while, but it turned into some of you people would have loved that WeChat group, by the way, because all day long, all they did was curse at me. And in the only way I can describe it is as China people curse. And I just didn't really understand it. Apparently, to call somebody a bear over there is sort of really bad. And I got called that all the time, but I got called a lot worse in that WeChat group on a daily basis. It was pretty hilarious, actually. But the deal is that we had F2 pool on the line, and they kind of bailed out on us. And that was tied with who we believe was Zhali Li, who's a really famous, really rich, really big time crypto guy in China who pulled a lot of puppeteer type strings. And we just believe he just told him not to support us. And ultimately, DxPool doesn't really have any of those old connections. And I think they are somebody that can come along and help us and perhaps ultimately drive some of this new hash rate to our chain. Another thing I want to cover really quick is, and it's really interesting because, you can kind of see this in action. And I don't know if it's just because people are tired of being put to sleep or whatever. But, when we started this Thursday meetup, we had a couple hundred people that would show up, and now we're down to 65, 66. And partly that's the bear market and where we are right now. I posted a tweet earlier about how liquidity is just really dried up for almost everything. And literally Bitcoin is just trading up and down in this channel and chopping people that want to get in there to bits. Everybody's, hopeful that, any up move is the one that's taking us on, and any down move, people are hopeful that want to buy at 12,000 is going to chop us down to where they can get coins at half price. And it's just not, going to reward anybody in this case. It's just going to chop them up. But what I read the other day, which was interesting, is that there's some 12,000 zombie coins out there right now. And these are coins that have no GitHub or GitLab work being done on them, and essentially have almost zero, exchange liquidity happening on them and so forth. And I think we're really in a good place, even though we're not in a great place crypto-wise. In the crypto world, we just have done a bunch of things different. So we don't fit a lot of, categories and so forth. So they don't really understand that we have a ton of GitLab activity going on because they can't actually get in there and see it. They can see the things like in Discord where you actually do see the commits going by. You just can't look at them because our code isn't open source for the relayer and for the host.io module, which are the keys to our thing. So that's not going to be out there and causing liquidity. And of course, we're only on South Exchange and Trade Ogre and Probit. And those are just not really ever a thing. So until we actually get this cap raise out of the way and ultimately get onto a name that's a little bit more, recognized, like Kraken, Bittrex, Wabi, whatever, we're just going to not be paid attention to, even though there's reasonable volume on our coin. There's not a lot, but there's activity, and it's not completely dead. And 12,000 coins having gone to that dead place is really useful right now because it probably makes getting on a bigger exchange easier for us and so forth. But it also highlights that retail just doesn't want anything to do with crypto right now. They just don't give a shit about this because they recognize that 90% of it is just bullshit, fraud, nonsense. And even some of the what people thought were good projects are now sort of being revealed to be swimming somewhat naked and so forth. So anyway, that's a thing. Couple three things to kind of cover real quick. This one kind of got a lot of play this morning, a little more stupidness than I thought I was going to get, but that's okay. So there's something called Supervisor-Light that we've developed, and Renat's been really working hard on this. He's really our go-to guy for supervisor, super admin, and in a lot of ways, a lot of activity that happens on the daemon. And the deal is that he went back and he created this thing called Supervisor-Light. Well, what is supervisor? Well, on the XMiners, there's three components. There's super admin, supervisor, and storage manager. And super admin is this tool on the back end, which essentially ties to a wallet and, covers a couple of things related to databases and so forth. And then there's supervisor, which is sort of like home assistant in some ways. And what supervisor does is it kind of drives the daemon and coordinates between storage manager and Grafana and all of the stuff that we have going on. And then, of course, storage manager is the UX that you are using inside the XMiner. And gives you all of that wallet representation and all of the stuff that's in there. Supervisor itself got disintermediated and created into this repo called Supervisor-Light. And what Supervisor-Light does is it essentially allows you to put in a couple of values like price, and then Supervisor-Light will adjust up and down around your given price so that you can stay within a bound. And that's useful, obviously, if you're trying to stay within the bounds of the project in order to receive max incentives. Then you can actually put the price that you want to hover around, $4, whatever, and then it will automatically work around there. Originally, it was set up to work on a beacon for our specified price, and it would talk to our Grafana. But that's centralized, and what we wanted to do is make this as decentralized and permissionless as possible. So you just choose a price, and if it's $4, then it's $4, and then you stay within the zone. The only time you'd have to change that is if we decided to say, well, we're going to give providers more than 4, or we're going to go less, or whatever. But I don't see that happening in the near future. So it's a pretty good implementation. The other thing Supervisor-Light does is it reannounces your address that you announced to the network. And this is where things got a little bit funny this morning. We have a guy out there who's written some software to re-announce on Windows. And of course, we have another guy who's written a script in Python to re-announce on Linux. And they both work, and, they both have, their own pluses and so forth to it. But at the end of the day, we always said we were going to give that to basic licensees. And it's ready. I mean, it's on beta 4 and looks pretty good. We haven't seen too much in the way of anything really showstoppery that's going to cause us to not release this thing. So on a calendar basis, what we're looking at is probably late next week, early the following week, we will release this Supervisor-Light implementation for basic licensees, and they will be able to go out and download it and, essentially have all of those services there. The one thing that caused the blow up this morning, which again, I don't really understand. And, at one point in time, I was a network engineer, so I kind of feel like I sort of have a reasonable sense of this stuff. But at the end of the day, they were protesting the loss of domain DDNS and domain naming for announced hosts. And, I provided a couple of simple examples about why having domain names instead of IP addresses really wasn't something that we wanted going forward. The two key sort of understandings there are pretty simple. One is, it doesn't look professional to have you guys naming your hosts all sorts of weird things when the customers are going to be SMB and enterprise type level grade customers, and they go out to look at the deal. And they see names that are less than, what they would want to see for professional storage providers. I'm not saying that some of the names are not just fine. They are, but you can put some pretty stupid stuff out there, and we've seen some of it. But that's also that's sort of the frosting thing. The one that's really there is that last year our progenitor network went through a DOS attack, and it was an odd one, by the way, and it didn't take down the whole network. And I kind of suspect that maybe they actually, orchestrated it, but maybe they were testing, maybe they were trying to do something. I don't know what was going on, but they went through one. And when they went through one, there was some pretty standard results. I mean, you saw what happened. And what happened was that people that were under sustained 48-hour DOS that were on DDNS services were in situations where their whole entire network went down, right? They couldn't do anything because their whole entire network got compromised under this attack targeted at this DDNS name. And in some cases, it became really challenging, and they lost access to important services not related to their project. But they also lost contracts, right? They couldn't renew contracts. They couldn't provide storage proofs. They couldn't do whatever. So they lost money. And ultimately, there really wasn't anything that could be done about it, right? There wasn't any mitigation for them. Meanwhile, the people that were on IP addresses, the worst case scenario was they had to contact the ISP and say, look, I need a new IP address, please. In most cases, they were able to just shut down their modems, wait, like 3 hours or 2 hours or whatever, and then bring the modem back up and force it to do a new DHCP call and bring out a new IP address. And then they were right back up and running because that address wasn't under attack. And, so that's the thing. It's not going to solve everything. I mean, if they start attacking subnets or whatever, that may not be a viable solution, but at least it's better than nothing on a DOS attack. And so we determined a long time ago that IP addresses was going to be the way this thing was done going forward. It's just that some DIYers just have this feeling or belief system that they ought to be running the show around here. And, all I got to say about that is if you feel like you ought to be running the show, there's an answer for that. And you need to start to look into it. For the people that want to be here on this network, it's going to be IP address, and we've now made it possible for everybody running a licensed provider to be able to do it with no real pain or suffering. Just stay tuned. You'll be able to download Supervisor-Light and run it pretty quickly. It's very lightweight application, doesn't really take up much in the way of resources and isn't going to bother or trouble you at all. So there you go. Now, that leads me to the last bit, but actually it doesn't. I'm going to interject before I get to the full license upgrades and talk more about that. I want to talk about this thing that I've titled The Coming of the Pain, or if you're a Princess Bride fan, To the Pain. We're going to be experiencing a little pain over the next couple of weeks in that the used storage line is going to perturbate a little bit. Essentially what's happened is, if you've been following along with this contractor, stuff, it's been a good year for us in a lot of ways because we learned a heck of a lot about the contracting that we didn't really know, and we could see its scale and we could see its at size. And so we have had a chance now to really look through almost every possible iteration of how contracts can fail. And so we've learned so much about that, and it allowed us to do a lot of things. Well, one of the things it allowed us to do early on was to set up this cluster, which is our contractor running in a cluster and at the same time running a large streaming data application called Kafka, which is something that very few organizations really have a need for, but we are one that does. And running this big Kafka cluster has been a learning curve, as you'd expect, but it's running smoothly and running really well. And literally what we see right now when there's contract issues or data loss issues or, issues where data is flatlined for no really earthly reason, usually it's related to the old contractor, which we left running because the old contractor had a whole bunch of test data uploaded on it. We didn't want to cause you guys to lose a bunch of incentive money, so we just left it running. But the old contractor was bad. I mean, it just had a lot of problems, a lot of challenges, and they've really ramped up. And, what we have finally decided is it's time to just retire that thing. I think there's about 530 terabytes there that are still outstanding. So about a third of the network of used data is going to be coming down over the course of the next 6 weeks. It'll come down in a somewhat gradated kind of way. The next week, some will come down, then the following week, more will come down. Following week, a little more will come down until we lose it all. And what we're looking to do right now is mitigate it to the best of our ability. I know that since there's only 65 people here, that means that over the next several weeks, we'll be answering this question over and over again in the Discord. And I know people are saying, well, why don't you send emails out? And I'm thinking, are we really going to send this email out? We're going to send an email out that we're deprecating a piece of technology that we had. Maybe we will. What we really need to do for emails, and we're going to start on that now, is we need to start getting regular newsletter type emails going out. Look, there's we haven't been shy about this. 100% of our funding has gone into development and coding. And now we're starting to get out there to where we need to touch and talk to the world. So marketing and those kinds of things are going to be, more prevalent. We will start doing more and more of that. So if you don't like that you haven't been getting a lot of emails from us, you'll start getting some. But because I hate getting a lot of emails from organizations, it's not going to be, one a week or one a day. Probably going to be one every couple of weeks, maybe even a little bit, further out than that. But we will start communicating with you that way as well. Obviously, the way we like to communicate with people is here in Discord. We use Twitter pretty heavily. We use Facebook pretty heavily. And we use Reddit to a lesser degree. Those are our primary comms channels for the community and the permissionless network. How we comm with our customers is going to be quite different. I mean, it won't be Discord. It's probably going to be pretty traditional email, Facebook, and, just the stuff that people tend to hate. But that's coming. So you need to recognize that you might be somebody who could be losing some data in the weeks ahead. And if you do, just know that we will be working to restore the test data side. And of course, as we've talked, we hope to start seeing real data show up on the network. We're not going to tell you about the real data. We're not going to tell you who's there. We're not going to tell you how much is there. You're just going to have to suss that out for yourself. And if you don't like that answer, I don't care. Last thing is the license upgrades. They're going pretty good. First of all, people are diving in and setting up Linux workstations who have never worked with Linux at all and are just saying, that's it. Right? They think that they're going to be expected to essentially launch the Apollo 5, and then they're, climbing into one of these SpaceX type rockets with the really cool looking boots and realizing they don't actually have a job. They just get to ride along because all the computers are doing everything for them. And, that's really kind of how it goes. People set it up quickly. They get past the setup quickly. They run the installer for the full license. And next thing you know, they're running an examiner on their own hardware. And it's fun and it's fascinating and it's awesome. And you should do it. And the thing about that is that it ties directly in with the project survival. When we talk about 12,000 zombie coins, what's happened there is exactly what you think has happened. Founders who really had no intentions to stick it out either decided to run with the money when they could, or they decided to give up when there was no money, or they just, for whatever reason, realized that this wasn't going to be a thing going forward. You have my commitment that I'm not going anywhere, sans some serious heart attack or some other crazy kind of thing happening like that. I started out, worked for 2 years on this with no paycheck and ran my savings into the earth. And, now that I'm making a reasonable salary, I'm, planning on sticking around as long as it takes. And if that meant that I had to stick around to another period where I ran without a paycheck, I would. As far as I know, a lot of the team has similar levels of commitment. So, we aren't going anywhere. This thing's going to make it. And if you don't believe it, all I can keep saying is stick around. What I will say to you about these license upgrades is this is how you can help. First of all, you're getting a great world-class piece of software that's going to really do a great job for you in making your unit into an examiner, but you are directly funding the development of the project and everything going forward. Some people are not happy about that. They don't seem to like that. But to the rest of you, and for all the people who have purchased licenses and license upgrades, we thank you. From the bottoms of our hearts. Look, it's been a challenging ride based on what we refuse to do, which is to do all the scammy shit. But at the end of the day, by the time we get to the end, I think we really are going to be the poster children for how you do this and how you do it right. And I think that people will hold us up and say, look, here's a project that did it and they didn't have to do all the stupid shit. And, it is what it is. You get your community involved and that's the deal. Now, what's going to end up happening is we're going to get into that next exponential wave of growth, and those people are going to come in, and you guys will be the old hands and the long timers, and you'll be telling them about how it was when the olden times and so forth, and those will be the good days, and those are coming. I don't think they're very far away, by the way. I think that anybody who sort of thinks that we're a long ways away, in other words, we have to get to this. We have like 18 petabytes of stored data before anybody even looks at us. I don't think that's what's coming. I think we're a couple of months away from some good things happening. And I think that at that point, all of us will be rewarded. The capital raise is going well. We're, starting to have meetings with people. I'll just toot my own horn a little bit, since I told you about how I sacrificed for the project. I will tell you that I sell this project better than anybody, and I always have, and I always will, because this thing is just super near and dear to my heart. So at the end of the day, I'm really not at all worried that we're not going to raise the money that we need to raise. It's just a matter of we're going to scrape on the bottom until we actually do, and that's where we are right now. But those days will pass. They'll pass pretty quickly. License upgrades really help us. Now, let's talk about the one thing you probably really do want to hear about, which is this thing about, seems like Faust keeps moving the goalposts. Seems like when back in the day when DIY actually built this network that, everything went to them and they got all the money and it was all paying for unused storage, and somehow we've transitioned all the way around to where DIY didn't build the network and now you have to, sacrifice your firstborn child and, blah, blah, blah. That's a little hyperbolic, but at the end of the day, the deal is that a full license is likely going to be what you need in order to fully participate in this project going forward. We've talked about the reasons why over and over and over again. When you run a simple daemon in a permissionless way where we don't have any idea who you are, when we don't have any idea if you're really where you say you are, if we don't have an idea what your environment looks like, if you're trying to run 18 daemons on one machine, for instance, then, at the end of the day, there's only so much we can do with you as a provider. Now, I understand that there are other projects that would hear what I just said and say, oh, that ain't crypto at all. The whole idea of crypto is to be completely anonymous and do whatever the hell you want and stick it to the man and blah, blah, blah. And that doesn't exist. It's never going to exist, by the way. I don't even care if people say Web3 these days, because the whole notion of being able to somehow operate outside of the purview of the establishment is just stupid, because there are always going to be a choke point that's going to shut you down. And if it isn't the bank, then it's going to be the internet, peering connections. If it isn't that, it's going to be something else. There is always a place where they can shut you off. And so people that are trying to sort of build this Web3 dream of we can build an internet outside of the internet and we can do our own thing and we can, put anything online that we want. Nobody can ever take us offline and blah, blah, blah. Well, if that was really the case, you'd be seeing it, running really hot and heavy alongside the real internet. And it just isn't. It isn't, because that's not where the money is. The people don't want to be on networks where there's child pornography and slave trading and all sorts of other nonsense. They don't want to be on networks where people, openly advocate for killing, people of another color or people who are on a different political spectrum. I mean, that stuff is whatever it is. And it maybe has its place to be debated and negotiated and whatever. But at the end of the day, the stuff we're after isn't that at all. The stuff we're after is all the real stuff that runs the world, the real world. And that's a thing where to put that kind of data into your bedroom or your basement or your, back office, you're probably going to have to provide some information. You're going to have to probably provide some way to contact you. You're probably going to have to provide some ability for us to do some auditing to make sure that you are in the location you say you are in. You're probably going to have to provide some information relative to how willing you are to lock that machine down. The good news is, if you are willing to do all of that, if you're willing to sign up, essentially, if you're willing to be in this thing for good, then essentially there's no reason why we can't take that compliance all the way to the tippy top and pull in the kind of data that is ultra secure. That's a real battle that we're going to have to fight in the coming months and years, is that we have to convince people, and I don't think it's going to be that hard, by the way. I think we're going to be able to do a lot of white, gray, black hat type penetration testing where we show that, we are virtually unbreachable. And that's going to be a big day when we're able to stand up and say we're unbreachable and somebody like AWS is not. Because that means that we should be able to onboard the top of the top of the top. Now, does that mean that the US government's going to put all kinds of like CIA stuff on our computers? I mean, I don't know. I'm certainly not going to be in that mindset of, suing Microsoft because they won the contract for the DoD that we didn't. I mean, maybe we'll, have reps out there submitting the bids, but I don't think we're really going to be that, worried if we don't get that kind of data. But getting patient data, medical data is set to explode. One of the things about disease profiles right now is that because data is not really intermediated into places where, research groups have the ability on an anonymous type way to go ahead and aggregate and really see exactly the truth of things. What ends up happening is that a lot of diseases don't get solved as quickly as they can going forward. And yeah, I know in crypto, we have a lot of people that just really want to sort of dispute how medicine actually works. And I don't really care about that. It is what it is. You guys are going to have your own opinions about things. But we're entering an age where big data and data aggregation is going to allow us to do a lot of things on medical stuff that just has never been done before. And so that kind of data is really critical to be kept anonymous, private, and, not able to be breached. And that's what you guys are going to provide. You're going to provide the most secure network on the planet. And we're going to prove that. And you're going to have to, submit to some audits for that. And that auditability is going to show up in the full license. The great news about the full license, I mean, we're giving it to you for next to nothing. And then the stakeholders in the project have decided to give it to you and actually pay you to take it, So if you're not going to get that upgrade done by the end of October, all I can do is shake my head, because this is the time. And the rebates are going away after October 31st. And, we're going to stick by that. I know there's some of you out there saying, yeah, well, that's what Faust said in May. And then we came back and, you knew he was going to give us a grace period. You knew he was going to give us another month. And sure enough, there it was. He gave us another month. And then after that, he turned around and said, all right, ollie income free. Everybody gets in on the free rebates. Sorry, on a Halloween, it's over. It's over. And so at that point, in February, when we're getting all of this really cool data onboarded, and suddenly you're saying, well, geez, how do I get into that next tier? Well, you're going to have a full license. Okay, but it's like $450 or $350. Yeah, and it's going to be $350, and that's just going to be the cross you'll have to bear for the rest of your existence in the network. Buy a license upgrade. I'm telling you, it's the way to go. Yeah, I get it. Some of you like to run the daemons. Some of you like to, tweak around and do whatever. But at the end of the day, this project is about running examiners. Examiners built this network. And when we get to 100,000 providers, we'll look back and we'll have a consistent network top to bottom. And when we get to 1 million providers like Helium has right now, in 18 months, we'll look back and we will have the best network on the planet, bar none. I truly believe in that. I hope you truly believe in that. That's about all I got. I'm going to open it up for questions. Ask me about the chat module in the full software version.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So, as many X-Miners may well have known or already used, there's a chat module where you can talk to one support team members. How's that looking in the full software? Is that available?
Well, you know what? I'm going to have to turn it over to our tech support lead on that one because I don't actually know the answer to that. Is that available in our software? And if it is, how's it looking?
Funny if it is, actually. I was speaking to someone today who had a question about applying their license because they had installed the full software, but hadn't actually applied the license yet, but was still able to get through to me on chat and ask about it. So yeah, that full software contains exactly the same chat module that the X-Miners have that the basics don't have. So if you don't want to use Discord, then that's another way to get hold of us.
Yeah, and you can see when we get to that place when we are like Helium, where we have like hundreds and hundreds of thousands of providers, this Discord thing isn't going to work as well. It's going to be a real difficult thing. I mean, it's already difficult where it is right now, and we're only a couple thousand providers. This idea of being able to just click the chat button right inside the XMiner software, get a hold of somebody and say, hey, I'm seeing this on my screen. What do I do next? That strikes me as being a really powerful tool that we're going to be able to provide. And of course, the basics won't have that. So there you go. It's another thing. How are you seeing the full software upgrades going right now compared to say a week ago? Are they improving? Are we seeing interesting new things, or is it just kind of continuing on the same vein? What does it look like?
Yeah, on the Linux side, I mean, it's going surprisingly well given the first day or two, which was a bit of a nightmare from a support point of view. But yeah, the developers sorted all those issues out, and now we're not seeing any real issues apart from the odd quirk, which is typically on the user side rather than the software side. But yeah, seeing lots of people saying, like you mentioned earlier, they've never installed Linux in their life, but they managed to stand up a Linux install and install the full software, and they're up and running in no time at all. The beta software on the Windows side, as you mentioned, is in good progress as well. Once James is back, obviously we'll get that tidied up and get that released as well. So yeah, looking good.
Cool. Thanks, man.
I think that, next up is really the sales and marketing strategy overall for the product. So, I mean, is there anything that you can share on that front where, things that you're doing, things that we can do to help, because that's what's really going to drive like network adoption overall, other than just pure word of mouth?
We have a couple of things that we can do in advance of getting funded. I haven't been shy in saying that there's literally no budget inside of our current, capital structure for marketing at all. I couldn't even go out and do a Facebook, ad campaign right now. There's just no money. So from the standpoint of today, what the deal is, what we're doing today is we're in the process of rolling out an architecture of information delivery. So this was the whole idea of what Henry, transitioned into in terms of product marketing. Our biggest marketing is not going to be, blaring ads that say use us over AWS or whatever. Our biggest marketing is going to be case studies and white papers and tech papers that allow IT admins to read up and study and understand our thing and understand why our thing's better than the thing they're currently using. So that resources section on the XNS site is really going to be a key functionality of our marketing. And Henry's got about 5 or 6 articles up there right now. We've got about 3 or 4 more ready to roll. We're going to keep throwing stuff up there that's more and more tech oriented and detailed. And then, as I've said, we're also going to be onboarding somebody to do this application testing and then, build these one-pagers of how you use these S3 applications directly. What are the steps you need to take to set up VM correctly? What are the steps you need to take to set up some media asset manager correctly? And so that's a very, very big way that we can plan to help onboard people. Then what we expect to do is to throw about $1 million of our capital raise money that we're seeking directly at traditional marketing. So roadshow work, brand marketing, getting out there and paying for advertorials at some of the big storage related sites, not the crypto folks, but the actual, Uptime Institute, all the way through to, the names if you're involved in any kind of the IT world at this point. But we need to get our name out there very clearly, and that marketing will be out there. And then the other thing that we plan to do, and we already have this in progress to a degree, it's kind of gone in fits and starts, but we've said we want to focus on partnering and partner relationships. And we do have people currently attached to the project that have that capacity. We have one investor, for instance, who runs a large, what you would call a distributor. They're actually one level higher than sort of an MSP. They actually sell to MSPs. And they have a ton of customers over in the Northern Europe area. And so they've been really busy. Their growth curve has been crazy. But the founder came to me yesterday and said, look, we're ready to go ahead and get this started. So we will be doing those kinds of onboards where we do custom coding and custom work directly for specific individual partners and do custom financial work with them in order to onboard data. Look, the way I think this is going to go is I think we're going to kind of like slowly get off the ground. We'll see a little bit of, fits and starts of data showing up on the network. But then I think there's going to be a couple of earthquakes along the way. I think we'll see some pretty significant data loads happen overnight. And, as those happen, I think people will be able to raise their fists and, cheer. But again, we're not going to tell you what they actually are when they happen. You'll just have to sort of suss that out for yourself. But that's pretty much it. I think our marketing is going to be pretty traditional for this kind of an entity. Long term, I see us doing the same thing that AWS and Microsoft and Google do, in that we'll probably host something like, reInvent. AWS hosts this event every year, and then they host offshoot events as well. Most of it's online these days, although they do bring people to cities. I think we will get out and do some of that sort of stuff, but we'll do it after we get the kind of development in place so that somebody comes in from the media and entertainment world, there's breakout workshops available for them. There's the ability to really show them how to use our stuff and go forward. So some of that's probably a couple of years away as we add more applications to our network and so forth. But hopefully that answered the question pretty comprehensively. We have it budgeted in our cap raise, and we are already working on it through Henry and some of the stuff we're doing internally. And there you go.
I think that's great. Thank you so much.
Yep. Anybody else?
Let me put my storage provider hat on. So let's say I have a DDNS that's called My Disk is Bigger Than Yours, and I'm always able to find it on Grafana because I can remember my silly title. When I switch to an IP, however am I going to find my provider?
I imagine there's probably some way we can make nicknames, right? I would think that our engineers can probably come up with a way for us to allow you to nick your providers so that internally between us and you and what you're doing has this ability to locate. There's got to be some answers there. To be frank about it, I don't know the answer to your question. It's a great question, and I think it's probably something we do need to investigate. Now, because you don't usually ask questions unless you know the answer or at least have some directive to investigate, what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I think the answer, and this will kind of solve some of the Grafana problems, and it'll solve that problem, is to just have the stats either be linked to or directly in the console. So the console will kind of be a place that you just log in to check the status of everything, and it just has your stats there. You never really need to be searching for your IP or your name nothing like that.
But what if you have like 14 providers or 1,400 providers or 14,000 providers?
Well, all those licenses would already be in the account, so it seems pretty straightforward to fold that info into the console at some point. And I think we're already kind of hoping to change the stats presentation away from Grafana and toward an actual web dash. So I think there's a place for the console to have an expanded role there. That's what makes sense to me. But
and that map needs the map is looking really good and it's coming along fine. And I think Cam added a search functionality to the map, and the map will become super important because you'll be able to just zoom right in on your whatever provider you're looking for, click the thing, and it'll just pull up your stats right there in the console for you. That's a good point and a good direction. And I think that's actually, right. We are driving more and more into the console. The console's becoming more and more functional every single day, and that's likely to be sort of the case on where we go. The other thing that comes up a lot, by the way, is IPv6, and I think that's definitely something we're going to have to tackle sooner rather than later, and I think we probably will. I know it's already built into the daemon to a degree. I just think it needs to be abstracted out better than it currently is, and I'm not sure exactly what the other pain points are. I'm sure the engineering side will be able to enlighten us on that, but that is something we do need to also do. A couple more questions came in. Justin Lee, man.
Just have a suggestion on that one.
Okay.
You know how with the Helium they assign like keywords, just random words to your account. You could do something similar, like when you announce your provider, just assign some random words as a designator, so that way you can ensure that it's unique, but it also is not offensive.
That's probably why they did that. Now that I think about it, I always sort of wondered about that. It's three random words, right?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'll skew that up as something to investigate, because you get that assigned to you and then you can easily remember it, and that might be a very good way to go about it. So thank you for that.
Yep.
Hey there.
Hey.
Do we have any news on how files are split across different folders on the storage provider? Is there a fix in sight, or not a fix, but that it's more manageable? That stuff isn't spread out into folders.
Well, the current daemon does have a workaround. The current daemon does send all the data to the single first storage folder. All the stuff that's already been uploaded to your computer is already there, so it's not going to get, undone and re-uploaded. But new data coming in should be going to the first storage folder on your units. We've identified some wrinkles there with the workaround, and so, like for instance, in the software version, if you remove the first storage folder, you're kind of screwed, and it won't migrate automatically like it does if you remove like the fifth storage folder or something. It's unfortunate, but what happened there was we had one of our early devs who has been, toying around and learning Go, because he's a Java dev, but he's been learning Go, and he really wanted a nice project to tackle, and this was right up his alley to really kind of nail that one down. But then, the whole thing with employers and quiet quitting and overemployment and all the weird stuff that's going on with work from home and everything, he kind of got called back rudely to his day job and had to beg out of that task right now. So I don't have an engineer on it. This cap raise is really critical in multiple ways for us. As I said, we have 2 cores at this point that we're thinking about bringing in when we get that, and that is one of those heavy roadmapped items that needs to be dealt with quickly, that I just don't have engineering assets yet to throw at it. If it stays with the current level of staffing that I have, it's probably going to be about 10 to 12 weeks out before we actually address that specific item. But yes, it is on our radar. It is very high profile, and we do have a plan to tackle it. It's all hinging right now on getting money into the company.
Thank you, Well.
My question is, I know you probably put a lot of thought into the pricing that you've got, but as a kind of new company trying to get new storage on the network, have you thought about reducing the price down, say like, I don't know, $3 or whatever, in terms of getting more people to store?
Pricing is an interesting conversation. It could take up a whole call and probably will in the future. I think we've been kind of, transparent about how we ended up at the number we did. Look, there's a couple of understandings to have there. There are people out there in the world that believe that this is commoditized now, and it's just not. The security aspects alone ensure that it's not. It's tricky business doing what we're doing, and what we're trying to do is we're trying to become something that's known in the industry colloquially as a hyperscaler. And hyperscalers have some real specific and interesting sort of liability factors and attack vectors and things that can happen to them. And at the end of the day, your security is your primary stock in trade. And so the people that are sort of out there saying, well, you should just give it away free, or you should give it away cheap, or come in under Wasabi or whatever, I understand how the internet works, and I understand, that there are some strategies out there that, sort of attempt to do that exact thing. But when you tear them apart, it's always done through some sort of subsidization that's either legit or it's not, or it's semi-legit. Let's take Wasabi as an example. So Wasabi's strategy was, well, we'll go out and we'll talk to a bunch of our old friends who have data centers that are small and mid-tier. We'll go ahead and tie them up together with some software. We'll pay them money for their overages. And so it's money that they don't really, expect to have earned already. So they're willing to go ahead and sell us data capacity cheaper than they perhaps normally would. And because these are a couple of old industry vets that started this company, they're great friends with all these guys. So, they're able to sort of talk them into stuff and so forth. And so they were able to come to the market with this price that undercut everybody seriously. I mean, it was crazy. Amazon's $23, they said $6. And, so that sort of set a bar. But that was the first way they got there. The real way they get there is they went out there and they did the whole thing that people are doing in crypto. They just did it a little differently. Essentially what they did is they went to Silicon Valley and they got their first big cap raise. And when they got their first big cap raise, that cap raise subsidizes that low price. And so their whole notion is, and in a growing and rising stock market, by the way, this is possible. You can go out and you can keep doing cap raise after cap raise as you grow, and you can keep subsidizing that loss leadering in the pricing in order to kind of generate people into your platform and so forth. And their hope was that they could get enough people to transition over to them that they could then ultimately raise prices and, get to where they need to go. Because $6 doesn't cut it. It doesn't cover the kind of expensing that is necessary. And at the end of the day, I don't know how I'm going to be proven out on that, but I feel like I am. But at the end of it, the two primaries, and now even Google to a degree, have not dropped their prices one jot. And in fact, in an inflationary environment, we're hearing stories about people in those cloud services talking about raising their prices, not dropping them. So for me to come in at $3, well, the first thing I have to do is I would have to cut my $4 to you down to $1.50. And then you would start to question, well, how are we going to make any money? And then you're going to slap your forehead and you're saying, oh, it's all incentives. We're getting paid this huge amount of money on incentives. Well, guess what? That's got to go away.
Sure.
That's going away. We've told you that for some time. Those incentives don't exist out of the blue. They don't exist by magic. They exist because we happen to own a couple of wallets where we can subsidize those payments out to the providers. But here's the problem. The coin price, if it had stayed at $1 or $2 or $3, if it had stayed at some comp that was legitimate compared to, like, say, Storage or Saya I'm not even talking about Filecoin. Filecoin is $4.4 billion fully diluted. We're 9 million against 4.4 billion. If you valued our company at $4.4 billion right now on the coin price, we'd be giving out a ton of incentives. We could get storage price down to essentially zero, and we could give out a ton of storage for free right now because the coin price allowed us to do it. But right now, the coin price has dropped down to where, we aren't even considered a real project. And so those coin wallets that I have set up to hand out incentives and to pay for rent essentially are going to go poof in the course of about a quarter. They're going to go poof quickly. They're going to go poof almost overnight. So look, I've said this over and over and over. If you want to see the project die, just keep selling off your coins. Sell them down to zero. Sell your coins to zero and the project will end if that's what you want. I know that doesn't taste very good, but it is the answer. As long as the coin price is at 20 cents, you're not going to see me try and convince storage providers to accept a lower dollar amount on their storage. And you're not going to see us be able to drop our prices. But even so, I still don't believe in the $6 price. I believe $9.99 is going to win. I believe when we show up and have a better network than Wasabi, have a better network than Amazon, have a better network than anybody, that coming in at $10 versus 23 and coming in with no egress, which is lock-in and a price that you don't factor in, and having no API touch fees on our cost. API touches are what take a $23 Amazon price and turn it into a $56 price at the end of the month, and we don't have that. That's going to be a really big thing that we can show. And I think we'll show that in case studies, and I think we'll show it in some really easy calculators and things like that. But I just feel like this whole race to the bottom is just not the answer for us. And I'm going to resist it as long as I possibly can. Subsidizing partners, though, so that they can turn around and offer really good deals for 6 months or 3 months or stuff like that, that is definitely a thing. So if you're a partner who has access to selling some storage and you want to side saddle a company and they aren't willing to pay more than a couple of bucks in order to try us out, well, that could be accommodated. What can't be accommodated is making our headline price $3 and then, hoping against hope that we're able to turn that into a profitable business. Probably not the answer y'all wanted to hear, but it's the only answer I got.
No, that makes sense. Thanks a lot.
Sure.
Hey, how's it going?
Good.
I just had a kind of a general question. As you know, I've been kind of like deconstructing different parts of like the software you guys have been putting out and trying to help where I can there. And I've kind of turned my focus back onto the relayer. And just curious if you had any updates surrounding, or if you can maybe expand more on the active repair side of the network. I know that's a costly thing. It's a very complicated topic to kind of like address, but is that something that's currently still being worked on, or is that something that's also kind of like suffering from the lack of money?
If you look at the storage white paper version 3, one of the things they did when they really dug into active repairs and went through it top to bottom, you would come away with this understanding that active repairs, when they are required, are really expensive, and that provider churn is really, really expensive, and it's something to be avoided at almost all costs. And I think what it did for them was it informed how they devised their erasure coding formulas so that they ended up over padding the network beyond what you might ultimately end up being able to do on one of these kinds of distributed networks. But they did it because they wanted to lower the amount of repairs significantly, even to the place where maybe they didn't even happen. And I think ultimately what you're going to see from us, and by the way, this goes back to Buzz's question on the last one. One of the other things we don't charge for, by the way, that the other networks are charging for, not Amazon and so forth, but storage and Saya and whoever, is they actually charge you for the redundancy. So if you send up on erasure codes 3x the amount of data in order to get the durability on your erasure coding, they charge you for that 3x. So next time you're using Firebase, make sure you look at your bill and see how much extra you're paying in order for that redundancy. We're going to charge you for your data and your data only. The redundancies, the bonus and benefit of the network. In our case, what we've decided, because active repairs is a big job and we definitely have it out on the horizon, but it isn't the priority just yet, is that we're working on setting up the right EC ratios for our network based on what we've seen for uptimes and the ability for any given host set to stay online for a good significant period of time, is to set up an erasure code set and then provide it in a real dumbed down way in the relayer itself, so that the customer can be assured that they're probably not going to have to face active repairs anytime, over the next several, months, couple of quarters, until we can get in there and actually do that coding work to really start to trim it down. It's a cost thing for us more than it is anything else. It isn't anything. In fact, if anything, it's a benefit for you guys because it forces us to use more providers in order to put more data out there to be assured that when we lose, we don't end up having to go back and, download the entire data set, reconstruct it, and resend it back out to the network. So I would expect to see when James gets back and starts working back on the Relayer app again, that you will see some dumbed down ability, probably see something that's like a advanced and a simple sort of Relayer interface. And simple will be the default. And simple will be, do you want good durability or do you want great durability or something like that? And then ultimately, either one you choose will be very robust in terms of EC ratios. And then over time, we'll change our ratios under the simple and advanced so they're a little bit tighter. And then for the people that want the ability to specifically choose a specific ratio and specifically choose providers, they'll go to the advanced screen and then they'll, take their chances with whatever they decide. And in those cases, if they go too tight, they should expect that they're probably going to run into a situation where they might lose some data because repairs are not yet functional.
No, that makes sense. I know that like in the Relayer interface, there's an area for like looking at files. So it looks like you guys definitely have some stuff coming on the horizon that you look at implementing. All right, well, cool. I'll just look forward to seeing what comes out with Relayer updates here in the not too distant future.
Yeah, I hate that every single answer these days comes from us is if somebody would just give us money, we could do everything that we want to do, but it literally is the situation we find ourselves in. The great news is, I'm not going to tell you the name, but we had a meeting today with one of the top VCs in Silicon Valley. The meeting went really well. The guy was really enthusiastic. There was a bit of an issue in that we did cross lines with his portfolio and another part of their house. So he's passing us over to those folks, and we'll probably be doing another presentation very shortly. Here's how I kind of look at it. We've talked to minor leaguers, in terms of venture funding, who just really don't get it. It is what it is. We've had this out already plenty of times. But now that we're in the process of actually handing out our deck and the relayer's working perfectly, and then, well, not perfectly, but everything's working the way it should, and our network is functional end to end, and I, run through the thing pretty well. I think what's going to end up happening, and today's meeting kind of confirms that a little bit for me. I think what we're going to see is we're going to see this round get closed pretty quickly. I think what's going to happen is people are going to say, geez, how is it we've never heard of you? How is it that you've been out here? How did you build this network? How is this software already work? I mean, they're just surprised to death when they see everything that we present to them. And they're like going, this is what we need, right? And I think that's what's going to happen. And I think once we get this funding and get these additional core engineers on, you're going to start to see the thing really crank up, because we have a lot of plans on our roadmap and we know exactly what we need to do. And it's stuff like what you're talking about.
Yeah, and just to kind of reiterate for folks too, I mean, the Relayer does work really, really well. I mean, the kind of throughputs that I can get is great. I mean, sure, it's got bugs like any other piece of software does, but it's not something that's insurmountable. So sounds good.
Looks like we made it. This was a long one. I don't know. It wasn't supposed to be. There was only a few things to talk about. always turns into it. Thanks everybody for showing up. Really appreciate it. Really appreciate your support and being here on the network. And good things are in store. Think good things are happening, and everybody stick around, and I guess we'll see you next week. Thank you.